Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole. This is another one of our weekly congressional chats about what's going on in Congress. Been a pretty busy week, quite frankly. A lot of legislation moved across the floor, and I was very pleased with the legislation. You could break it into three different elements. One was an overall effort to limit the ability of the executive branch to legislate by executive order. This is called the REINS Act, and basically it says executive orders that cost more than $100 million impact on the economy have to come to Congress for approval. That takes a lot of power away from the executive branch. Using executive orders, the Biden administration has increased spending by something over $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion in 2 years. So this is a way for Congress to reclaim its authority. Now, it's got to get through the Senate. That'll probably be tough, but at least the House is on record. You've also heard some interesting speculation about whether or not the Biden administration wants to pass rules that make it almost impossible to purchase or continue to operate gas stoves. Congress went on record to say, on a bipartisan vote, by the way, that's nuts. People need to have the ability to use gas stoves. They're pretty common around the country, certainly in Oklahoma. They give you an alternative source of heat and warmth. Believe me, I've lived through enough Oklahoma power outages to know when I've been very happy to have my not only gas stove, but gas fireplace that could actually keep the house livable when we lost power in particularly cold ice storms and what have you. So that was a good thing. And finally, in addition to that, we had a very important Second Amendment issue dealing with pistol braces. These are braces that help people with disabilities, many times wounded veterans, continue to operate firearms. During the Obama era, a regulatory task force recognized these as okay. That was changed by the Biden administration, where you had to get a license to get them. It becomes very costly, very onerous. Congress in the House and the Senate has gone on record against this. This is just an effort to infringe on Second Amendment liberties, and we moved pretty decisively. It got slowed up last week in an unrelated dispute, but that was all straightened out. So that's pretty significant legislation moving through. We also, in the Appropriations Committee, we had a rocky week in some ways. I mean, there's pretty sharp and hard feelings because Republicans continue to push hard to limit spending, to claw back money that's been spent in the past when Democrats had uncontested control of Congress. But at the end of the day, two bills are reported out of committee so far. One's called the Military Construction and Veteran Affairs bill. That's pretty important, and there's actually a modest increase in spending for veterans in that bill, a little bit above the president's request. Again, a lot of contention about different parts of it. We still have to come to a deal with the Senate, and we still have to pass it across the floor of the House, but the bill is out of committee. We got a second bill, the agriculture bill, again, pretty important in a place like Oklahoma. Very similar, pretty hard fought, but the bill is now ready to go to the floor and be considered there. And finally, the Appropriations Committee set what it's called its top lines on the 12 different bills that it passes to enact the discretionary budget. That's everything from bills as large as defense, which is over half the total money that Congress appropriates on an annual basis, to very small bills like what's called ledge branch, which is how Congress funds itself. But the reality is, we're in the next few weeks, the Appropriations Committee will be working to get all these bills out of committee. Now, if the Appropriations Committee meets this deadline, then the leadership of the Republican Party in the United States House will have to start moving bills across the floor at some point. And they've got to get the votes to do them, and these bills are going to be controversial. So how that process goes at this stage is a little bit unpredictable. The Senate needs to be doing the same thing, and while you follow all the contention in the House, it's worth noting the Senate hadn't passed an appropriations bill out of committee, and there's 12 different bills in 2 years. They literally have not done their work. They've just bundled everything together every year and thrown a big omnibus spending bill without going through the kind of process the House is going through now, where you look at each bill, you set the limits of spending in each bill, you have amendments. Frankly, there's no restriction on amendments in the Appropriations Committee itself, so it's a pretty freewheeling process. We keep track of it because it's pretty important in a district like the 4th District of Oklahoma, where the two largest employers are major military bases, where we have major research university, the University of Oklahoma, the National Weather Center, the Kerr Laboratories in Ada, which are the premier groundwater research facility for the United States, Indian Hospital down in Lawton. We have lots of federal facilities. So we have a lot at stake in a lot of different appropriations bills, and we spend a lot of time, since I'm vice chair of that committee, trying to look after the interests, certainly of the 4th District, but also, frankly, of Oklahoma in general, working with our other members in our delegation, and particularly with Stephanie Weiss, who's one of the newest members on the Appropriations Committee, and of course a very important ally to my office, but much more importantly, a very important advocate for Oklahoma. Another voice on that committee is a good thing, and we sit on different subcommittees for a reason. That just stretches out our influence across the committee. So good thing for Oklahoma there. Finally, let me just end looking ahead. Again, I expect the next few weeks to be extraordinarily busy. I expect the things to be extraordinarily contentious. Remember, we live in an era of divided government, a Republican House, a Democratic Senate, a Democratic President. We have a very narrow majority in the House, and so it's been pretty rambunctious so far this year. But, all's well that ends well. We got to a debt ceiling deal that did some historic things in terms of limiting spending. We're going to continue to do that in the appropriations process, but also try to advance the important priorities for the country, like defense, and important priorities for the state of Oklahoma. So stay tuned, and we'll look forward to visiting with you again. Oh, one last thing I did want to mention was a very important Supreme Court case. This is something I've been heavily involved in. There's something called the Indian Child Welfare Act. It simply sets out procedures so that when a child is up for adoption, that the tribe that the child is from has the right to be consulted, and the right, if possible, to place the child with another family within that tribe. That's pretty important, very important for tribes to be able to continue to look after their own children, maintain their own culture. Quite often, when children are taken outside of their tribe, they lose that ability. Congress has been very active in this area, really since 1978, when the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed, and will continue to do that. But it was confirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court in a 7-2 case that this kind of action by Congress is constitutional, is appropriate. The Supreme Court thereby recognizes the sovereign rights of tribal governments and the important interests that they have in their own children, and children that might otherwise be lost to them and to their culture, have the best possible opportunity to remain within that culture, within that tribe. So I thought that was a good outcome, a fair outcome. It's important to a lot of people in Oklahoma. We have, of course, 39 federally recognized tribes. About 16% of our population are tribal citizens, and most of them are pretty proud of that tribal heritage and do what they can to perpetuate their tribal heritage and support their tribal government. So again, a pretty good day at the Supreme Court if you care about Native American issues. With that, be happy again to continue this dialogue this summer. So good luck to you and your family, and God bless.